Well, welcome back to the Added Time podcast with me, Alan Myers, and Tony Grant. And today we're talking all about the academy and youth system in professional football. And today we've got with us a great guest, Stuart Jones, former head of academy at Blackburn Rovers. And Stuart, welcome to the programme. We're going to talk about all things the academy and youth football. As we say, what has changed? How different does academy look now than what it did probably when you started?
Yeah, I think it's totally different now. Obviously, about 12, 13 years ago, the introduction of the EPPP changed everything, really, the Elite Player Performance Plan. And I think, Tony will back this up because he was actually at Blackburn at the time as a youth coach. And we came through the youth systems. I came through at Liverpool, obviously Tony at Everton. And I think if you looked at it back then in terms of the what we had to come through and what we had to do compared to the young players now, so it all changed really. Up until then, I think at academies, there wasn't real much structure. I think coaching was done a little bit ad hoc and for the benefit of the team and the group more so than the individuals. I guess there was no real consistency between age groups in terms of playing styles, philosophies. I think it was just coaches with a group of players looking after the group of players to win a game on at the weekend. I think obviously about 13 years ago that changed with the EPPP and now it's become, and we'll probably get onto it, it's become very much a school-like learning environment for young players. I think gone are the days of looking after the team in a group. It's now about individuals. So in the youth systems now, the focus is on individual players within a group. And I think there's pros and cons to that. I think when it actually happened, it was a bit of a culture shock for the academy system then, because you had a lot of coaches and staff who were working with players, and then all of a sudden they brought the EPPP in where academies were being audited. Coaches had to open laptops and build session plans, and data was brought in around minutes of players and development minutes, and there was rules brought in about players had to play certain amount of minutes. So the whole landscape changed for youth development. And if I'm honest, it probably came to a point where some of the coaches were like, this isn't for me. Some of the younger coaches maybe embraced it a bit more. So it changed the whole landscape. And what I would say on that, Alan, I think there's elements of it that I think, having lived through it and been through it, I think were for the better of the game, and I think we're seeing some of the benefits of that. I think the other side, and we'll probably have a chat about it, I think we've got to be really careful we don't lose some of the old style way of working with young players, which I do think maybe is not as evident as much in the system now. Some of the old school principles when we were coming through as YTS players, because ultimately we were being prepared for first teams and it was tough. I think we've lost a little bit of that, if I'm honest.
Did you find that as a coach, Tony, in youth football, which you were, I think, at the time, did you find that difficult to change that mentality?
Well, I started at Blackburn as a under-18 coach. And my recollection of coaches before that, really, Colin Harvey always stood out for me. And if you'd ever get any pictures of Colin when he was coaching, he'd always have a piece of paper down his sock, especially when he was joining in. So always stuck with me that. And when I became a coach, what it normally was your session. So you'd write the session out, and you just leave it in your sock in case you forgot anyone's name or what session it was about, what you were trying to get out of it. But then when you finish training, normally that session, lots of time would just be lost. And then the EPPP started, as Stuart was saying then. And for me being young, I was one of the ones who embraced it. But I was working with a couple of older lads, older coaches who'd been coaching much longer than me. And I became a little bit of a...
Nobody likes change, do they?
Not really. No, change is the hardest thing to do, isn't it? It really is. And they couldn't... They found it hard dealing with the computer.
Yeah.
And it got vaster then. The EPPP got vaster. It started being learning objectives. So when Stuart's talking about a school environment, it almost became that. It's probably... At the start, we probably didn't really know where it was going to go. And now it's probably a little bit easier now, like 12 years later. But when it first started, it was a lot to take in as a coach. But I do think the younger ones embraced it. And going further now, talking about that individualised stuff, that's going to be the next thing we can talk about in a moment.
I mean, when you look at it, the actual system, and people talk about Category A, or is it Category 1?
Category 1.
Category 1. Is that as important as some people have you tell? A club like, say, for instance, Blackburn.
Yeah, I think the thing with the categorisation, and certainly being a Category 1 programme, especially now with young players, if you've got players coming out of the big clubs, whether that be Liverpool, I'm going to put Everton in there, City, United, then players automatically want to go into a Category 1 programme, because the benefit to that I guess it's all around the games programme as well. So if you're in Category 1, you're playing the best in the country. You're playing against the best players in the country. Also, what the categorisation did was the fact that clubs then had to have certain facilities and staffing structures in place. And if you're Category 1, there's a benefit to that, because then as a young player, listen, it's not just about, but you're in top facilities, you've got top expertise around you, psychologists, nutritionists, the best pitches against the best teams. There's benefits to that to young players. Ultimately, it's then how they go and perform. But there's benefit to that, and I think that was the importance, certainly for a club like Blackburn and they were, we were Category 1 from day one right the way through, really. And it was really important because it also helped from a recruitment perspective of young players who were coming out of the big clubs, who wanted to stay in Category 1. That helped in terms of being competitive to bring them in. And then obviously the benefit from the investment, there's a minimum spend required. I think it's just gone up to about 3.6 million.
It was about 3 million.
So that was really important. And then obviously the games programme was a huge one when you're playing the other top clubs.
I think that's the big one, the games programme.
Yeah.
When you're a young kid, you want to play against all the big teams, don't you?
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest thing, which is harsh on the Cat 3s. I don't know, do they get a chance to play the top teams?
Yeah, I mean, they're still obviously in the Youth Cup. There's certain competitions now that they, certainly with the Cat, even Cat 2 and Cat 3s, where they get opportunities to do that. But what I think's important, though, for youth development is, and this is where I was a little bit like, not frustrated, but sometimes these young players, when they get all the nice facilities, they get all the staff around, and they get nutrition, sometimes they've got experience the other side of the game in terms of going and training on a muddy pitch and against aggressive teams. You go and play, no due respect, but you go and play City's, Chelsea's. It's a nice way of playing in general, good quality. I think from a development of young players, we did try and expose them to a mixture of games programme where they were going to places that it was going to be tough. They were going to get kicked. It was going to be physical. The pitch wasn't that great. Because that's important for developing young players.
That's like changing the players' mentality, isn't it? As well, the parents, the agents' mentality who are looking after the kid. It's basically saying it's tough to make it.
Yeah.
So you can't just, you might have been released by a Liverpool or an Everton, and you're at Blackburn, who's another Cat 1, and everything's brilliant there. Training facilities are brilliant, but you've got a journey, and the journey for some players it might be straight into the first team. But the majority have to find it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So exposing them to non-league. Yeah. A lot of these kids don't want to go. And that's your next fight as an academy manager, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about pressures from parents and all those sort of things, which will come into it, I'm sure. But, there's an old saying in football about results don't matter when it comes to youth football and academy football. But I've always been uncomfortable with that, because I always think every game a footballer plays, a result matters. Am I being over the top there? Is that unfair?
Do you know what? I think when this came in 13 years ago and the way of thinking in academies, it did switch heavily from that when we were coming through systems as young players. It was about teams. It was about winning on a Saturday, and it was the coaches would come after you if you didn't win games. I think when this came in and it became more of a learning environment and a development environment, I think the culture within academies changed to the point of now we have to think about individuals. Now we have to think about longer term development, which takes time over a period of time. And I agree, maybe that element of now it's about winning, because ultimately we're preparing these players for first team environments or senior football, and it is about winning everything. So there has to be a point where you change that mindset of the staff and the coaches to it's a winning mentality, because we're preparing them for that environment. And I always found that a challenge, really. I think within the youth setups, that it is a development model and it is about progressing players, but at what point do you start thinking about winning? When does the winning mentality come in for young players?
I think back in our day, you'd have a lot of coaches who probably coached through the character. You know, a lot of them would shout at you, scream at you, spit at you, because they're so angry.
And not because they've just got a lisp.
No. It's just, they were just letting their emotions. It was almost like most of them were ex-players, and they just got right into coaching. Probably haven't gone through the EPPP. Obviously wasn't around in them days, so probably education. It was just purely, it is what it is, and they're telling you the right thing. So for me, for instance, it would have been tracking me runner. Do you know when I was like 15, 16? But I wouldn't have been told the way I coach now by my coaches back then. I'd have been rawder. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely rawder. So I think what's happened as well over the last 10 years is the coaches have changed. How they approach it. I still think winning is key, and I still think all the kids who are playing all want to win. I think it's the feedback. It's a bit different now than what it was back then.
Yeah, and the coach, I guess those coaches' attitude, I mean, that's reflective of society, isn't it?
Correct,
society's changed,
Yeah.
so you can't, and probably for the right reasons in many cases. But there comes a price, doesn't there, with a head of academy, because you've got to provide for that. Owners and people at the clubs are going to look and say, well, hang on a minute, what are you bringing through here, and what are you doing? If you know what I mean. So I guess there's a difficult challenge there for you.
Yeah, and it was, because ultimately you are judged. There has to be some. If you're investing £3 million into your youth system every year, there has to be some form of return on investment. I think when I first joined, maybe Phil Jones had just left.
Yes.
For about 16 million.
That's right.
And maybe there was a thought that could happen every season, and it is difficult. But I think over a period of time we did well. But I think going back to even the coaches, maybe that's, and I know coaches across the game, and I've had conversations where they've really struggled because it has changed. It's now a development. It's now individualised. Maybe some of the old style coaches struggle to give people the emotional side and control that, because listen, years ago, as I say, it was quite brutal, and but that was the reality then. But it has changed, and I do think for the better. But there's still an element at times, certainly with the older players, that you have to have them real harsh conversations from a development perspective, even because, again, if they go into a senior environment, the managers.
Yeah, I think the landscape has totally changed. So we're talking about development, but you take that onto some first team. I've seen first team managers. The guy who's just been sacked by Rangers, I've seen one of his quotes a while ago. I'll never change my way of playing. And it is academy football. You've heard it a lot of times at first team level. Don't mind them making a mistake because they'll learn. That's at first team level. So the landscape's totally changed right the way through. And there's so many coaches or managers now who are actually practicing on a Saturday afternoon when people have paid the money to go in and are putting up with it.
Yeah.
How many times you've seen so many goalkeepers nowadays, haven't you? Getting caught with the ball, trying to play a little 6-yard pass into midfield. I think you've seen one of. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's loads of examples of it, but you've seen one at City a few weeks ago, didn't we? I know City will show you the 100 where they've scored off them, but the way the football has changed now, the academy system is propping it up, really.
And I think a lot of the coaches now, as you said there, a lot of the coaches have come through that EPPP model. And when it first, all of a sudden you had to have a philosophy. It had to be aligned through your system from first team down. You had to have key playing principles within your philosophy. And that had to be demonstrated when auditors came in. And so all of a sudden it just shifted to this system and process that you had to put in place. And you had to show that you were going to play out and play through the thirds, even when it wasn't on. When it'd be like, you have to go long. But because you put down your philosophy, we got lost on that's how it's got to look all the time. And I think that was the massive shift.
But in reality, that doesn't really happen, though, does it? You know, when you look at, you know, managers now in the Premier League, and let's not be disrespectful to them, but they really don't care, do they, how you're playing down at 17s and 16s? You know, they might make out that they do, but I think the reality, what I've seen down the years, is that managers have their own way of playing and they'll play that way, and that's it, you know. So that's a bit of a, I mean, how do you bridge that gap, if you know what I mean? You know, is there that?
There's some examples, isn't there, of clubs who have ran with the EPPP and have got a system of play and a style of play, and they then recruit managers on the back of really what the academy started, not so much what the first team started, almost what the academy started.
Yeah.
Such as Brighton's and the Brentfords.
Yeah.
You know, I played against Brighton when I was playing at Burnley in the Championship, and they didn't play like this.
No.
They didn't try and play like that. So at some stage, whether it was with the owner, the EPPPs had some effect on them as a club, and maybe they've sat down and they have created a way of playing.
So there is that uniformity through the club.
At some clubs. Now you go back in the day, Liverpool always had the pass and move before the EPPP.
Yeah.
Didn't he? They did, didn't
They've
they?
had it for
forever, haven't they?
70s.
Yeah, they've had it forever. So theirs really was all. And when you played against them in the youth teams, they actually did play. They tried to play like the first team.
Right.
So they sort of done it anyway. But not every club had an identity. Now, even now, I agree with you. It's the first team managers don't really care. No. But there's some clubs,
and that's understandable sometimes because they've got their jobs to worry about, haven't
Correct. But there is some clubs who have actually took that mantle, and that I think that runs right through the club now. I think it is that, and I think there's only a few clubs who do it.
Which is best, though?
Well, that's the debate, isn't it?
Yeah,
that is a debate.
I think, you know, I always look at it, even your 9s, 10s, and 11s, the little babies. I think you've got to come away from having philosophies and ways. Just let them go and play. Just let them be kids, and you've got to be real. That's where you've got to be really careful in development. And listen, I've got a 12-year-old who plays grassroots, and I go and watch him play, and I hear coaches on the sideline shouting press, intensity, passing lanes, and I'm thinking, this is like 3 years ago when they're playing grassroots 8 and 9, and it's a bit like just let them have the freedom to just go and play. That's a little bit for me.
Develop who they are first.
Well, before when I was saying we'll come to it, it was that individualised coaching type of thing, right? I think one of the things the EPPP has given us, which probably a bit of a negative, coaches now actually, for me, sometimes aren't coaching for the real reason, which is player development. It's coach development. So I think sometimes they're putting their own mantle on my team, play like this.
Right. Okay.
Do you know what I mean? And sort of missing the players. You know, there'll be games, you'll go and watch a game where the forward doesn't get a ball. No one finds the ball. But he'll come away and go, my team had 300 passes.
Yeah.
So I think one of the problems we have with the coaching, a lot of it I'm a fan of, but one of it is I think coaches actually see themselves as something more than what they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think, sorry, just on that, I think also, and this is what you found, sometimes when you have this philosophy and way of playing and it's aligned through, but then sometimes you've got players that don't allow you to play that way, and that was a frustration of some of the coaches, certainly higher up at 17, 18s, where, okay, we want to play this way, we want to play through, we want to, you know...
But that's my point. That's my
then
point.
we haven't got a midfield player who can get on the half-turn and
Yeah.
play forward, so there was that used to be a frustration to say.
So that's the point, isn't it? That's the point, saying the coach is thinking about himself more than
so it's about their coaching methods.
It's about their coaching methods, because I haven't got that play. But you're not a first team manager.
Yeah.
You're just a coach developer. Get the best out of your players. But you'll find coaches who won't want to play a player because he doesn't do a certain role. But rather than getting the player in, he's supposed to be a good player. Get the best out of him. Get the best. I believe coach development and
coach him.
Coach him. I honestly believe right the way through, even a first team, as a coach, I think it's totally different than being a manager.
Yeah.
And it is purely player development.
But is the manager gone now, you think? You know, we look at, you know, a lot of these clubs, and we were talking about directors of football, weren't we, last week? You know, and is that the director of football almost mean that managers are no longer, there's no actual manager anymore. You don't, because in my day, when I used to watch football years and years ago, it was the manager did everything.
Yeah.
But now that's not the case. And is it, do you have to just be a coach now to get on
Yeah, I think that's the model, isn't it? That seems to be the way of working, where you have a head coach and director of football, sport and director, different titles. And I think from my experiences, they sort of identify the philosophy, the way of playing, from then it's the recruitment perspective to bring in players to play that way. And it's very much then on a head coach to coach the players. And but it's driven sort of from I guess clubs operate differently, but it seems as though that's the way it's going a lot more.
I think my recollection of managers is one of the main thing was the leaders. So even now, I think every manager should be the leader. So when he walks in the room, he should sort of command a bit of respect. So players should be quiet because he walks in or when he's talking, and give the manager that respect. And I think the best managers will get that respect. And the ones who are like coaches, I'm sure there's a couple of them. I think back in the day, they'd been a bit like Dario Gradi was like a coach manager, wasn't he? In a way. I think they've always been there. But I think there's got to be a separation from a manager to a coach.
Is the hardest part of your job telling a player that he's not going to make it?
Yeah, without doubt, that was the toughest part, because, and certainly some of these players you've been with for a number of years, who join you from 9 years of age, and then they get into 16 or 18, them critical years where they're that close to a point of being senior players. And that was always the hardest thing. And do you know what, I was thinking of that the other day. I think you may have discussed it possibly on a previous podcast, but like when I come through at Liverpool, and it happened to me at the end of 18, I remember we were all in the dressing room at Melwood, and it was literally, you go down the corridor in the office, sit down, right, that's it, you're done. And that was it.
Yeah.
And it was like,
Yeah.
off you go.
Yeah.
And I think to myself,
All those dreams.
all them dreams, but there was no sort of next step.
There's no net to catch you, was there?
I didn't have agents, but I don't even think it was known for young players then. Whereas what I would say now, when as tough as those decisions, and when you had to do them, as I say, with some of the lads who you'd known for years, and you got to know the families really well, and they'd become part of the club. That was the toughest times. But what I would say in the back of that, I think and that's probably down to the EPPP, and where clubs do it really well, is that level of then support that comes around the player, whether that be, opportunities and picking the phone up with other clubs, whether that be a player care perspective. Certainly we used to do it where you give the lads maybe a bit of time off to just digest, but during that period, you've now got a club psychologist, player care officers that are in constant contact to just...
The focus on mental health now is so much more.
And I think it rightly so, because you're shattering the dreams a little bit. And I think the pressures now for young players to become, because the rewards are so high, if you can get there, the pressures on them young players when they're coming through, and it could be agents as they get to that age, it could be parents, because of the financial rewards to a point, but the pressure that I've seen young players get from parents about making sure they stay in the system. Sometimes you forget. And I think also the other side is that I used to speak to some of the players at all ages. Oh, what have you done this week? Have you been out? And they're like, well, I don't really go out much, because they're that much in the programme, 4 times a week at the club, 3 evenings, playing Saturday morning, Sunday morning. I think sometimes, and it's something that I used to eat away at me, that you forget about. They haven't really got a life outside of it because of the demands
And the young
from
kids
such a
are.
young age.
The dedication.
Yeah, it's.
But Stuart just mentions there, I mean, you can paint the picture of walking down Melwood back in the day, can't you? And many of these other clubs. When you get told you're getting released as a young boy, which is why we've had lots of problems with mental health right through different eras. And it's the same now.
Yeah.
The difference now is kids are growing up more educated because there's more departments wrapped around them
Yeah.
who are supporting them. There's more feedback. There's more one-on-one conversations. There's more right conversations. But at the same time, at some stage, most of them will have that conversation.
Yeah.
And dealing with that, no matter how much... I mean, see, Crystal Palace has done something really good this week or last week. I think it's been a while coming because I think they've been building something. But they're looking at giving lads who've been released like an extra 3 years in that environment to either carry on or to go a different pathway. And I think because mental health is so relevant and it's here, I think clubs have got to do a duty of doing something better. But I do think it's hard because how do you stop a dream?
I seem to think there was some sort of thing at Blackburn to do with that. Am I wrong? In sort of looking at players, when they get to a certain point, and there was some sort of security. Am I wrong?
I think at Blackburn it was all we were really good with the player care side of things and the aftercare. And maybe there was an element where I was conscious of that, having been through it. But I think all the clubs now, and that was one of the rules that the EPPP brought in as Category 1, you had to have a full-time player care officer. You had to have... So they governed the rules around it, really, for that reason. But, yeah, as I say, they're never easy. But what I used to say to coaches along the way is that during the player's journey, what was really important from all the staff, but the coaches who were working with them, is that when you had that review process where you'd sit them down, you were really honest. As harsh as that is, because it then shouldn't come as too much of a shock when it does come down the line. I think that the problems that maybe academies and clubs have is that if I'm going, Tony, you've been great, you're doing this, you're doing really well, and then 6 months later they go, I think it's a bigger shock. So I was always saying, in the right way, make sure that we're honest with players and parents along the journey. I think that's really important.
Yeah, but there's a balance, I guess, in that, because you've got to motivate them as well at the same time.
It's so hard that though, isn't it?
Very difficult.
To get the magic wand to fix that part of it, because it's such a unique business, isn't it? It's so unique.
Well, I want to talk about some of the successes you had at Blackburn, because there's been a few. And I think we go back, certainly when I was there as well, and when Tony was there, it was David Raya, who of course came through, and I think he went on loan, didn't he, early on?
Yeah, I think at the time I'd just started, and obviously Tony was there, and the club obviously had a link with a Spanish club, and David was one who came through that link, really, and there was a few others, wasn't there? You remember? Yeah, there was a few. And he came in, I think he was 16 at the time, when obviously players could change a bit now with everything in the rules. But at the time he came over, and I think there was no doubt from day one in terms, you always thought his distribution was outstanding.
He used to train with the outfield lads, and he actually was...
really?
He was better than all of them.
Yeah. Really?
As in, football-wise.
Football, yeah.
He was a fantastic footballer.
And
his touch was amazing.
Yeah, I think physically he always wasn't the biggest for the goalkeeper, but his spring and his athleticism around the goal. And he developed really quickly. Obviously, he then went out to Southport on loan for a period of time, which really helped him, I think.
Well, what you were talking about before, about getting that sort of level of reality in football, I guess that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that really helped him. And then obviously he broke into the first team.
I think I remember him making his debut against Leeds away, if I remember rightly, and I think Blackburn won on the night. So it was, but it's interesting you talk about his distribution, because of course at that time goalkeepers was just starting to be talked about with regards to their distribution, and now it's possibly number one, isn't it?
Yeah,
when you look for a goalkeeper,
it's dead interesting when you think about his pathway and where he went, because he went to the club. We were talking before about clubs who sort of have a DNA right through from the EPPP, and Brentford would be one of them. And then they've obviously gone to try and find a goalkeeper who's a young talent, but is exceptionally good with his feet. And he actually is. He's probably top level with his feet. And obviously he plays for Arsenal now, so he's obviously one of the best goalies in the world now, isn't he?
But he did have them traits, I think.
But he had them traits, yeah.
Could you see this lad's going to go?
Yeah, he had certain attributes, I thought, at the time, where you think... And the way the game was changing,
well, that's what I'm saying. When you bring it back to the EPPP, and when you bring it back to the club development and how clubs were playing, some things you've lost such as more strikers. We've had this conversation before, haven't we? There's less strike. You go to watch an academy system now, nearly all of them got one up front.
Yeah.
Centre halves are more better on the ball.
Yeah.
Centre halves are more comfortable on the ball. But goalkeepers, I mean, you're now creating sessions involving goalkeepers. Whereas years ago, they were left with the goalie coach and give it a whistle, sends them over when we're ready to play. You know what I mean?
It's done,
But, you know,
You're only doing crossing and finishing or shooting, and you're turning the ball.
So-
That do.
That's it, yeah.
So there's been the EPPP's brought lots of player development for certain players, but then it's also had a negative on certain players.
Yeah.
On certain positions, should
strikers,
we say?
yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it?
And then, of course, more recently, I'm sure you'll name a few, but more recently, Adam Wharton came through with his brother as well. And again, you know, what a fantastic player.
Yeah, incredible, I think. And that's the other side when you talk about academies and bringing players through and pathways. What's important for any football club is that you create the pathway and you give opportunity. And you always hear these comments, don't you? Oh, I don't think they're ready. Well, what is ready? Because how do you know until? And I think where we were fortunate is that the managers at the time gave opportunities for young players. Now, sometimes that's circumstantial, injuries or other reasons, but the players were given opportunities to come through, and that helped massively. And we brought a number through at one period of time with Scott Wharton came through and Trav, Buckley, Costello. There was a number of players that came through, but thankfully there was then the coach at the time or the manager at the time wanted to give young players opportunities. So,
and is it important that manager is? Do you think it makes a difference if that manager's come through the coaching, like the sort of youth academy sort of path, if you like, as well? Do they have a better look on what you can get from your youth side rather than a big name manager who might come in and just think, no, I want the players I've bought?
Yeah, I do think as first team managers it's ultimately about winning and getting 3 points on a Saturday. I think sometimes if you've come through a youth system, you may, as a youth coach, you may have a little bit of a mentality around development where you want to work with young players. And I think, we had Tony Mowbray for 5 years and he was really keen on working with young players and giving opportunities. And ultimately, then it's up to the player. They have to be showed that they're good enough. And what I would say about Adam, goodness me, from the age of 6 years of age, when he was coming in on the pre-academy, early on at 9, he was an outstanding footballer in terms of. And people used to say, "Oh, he was a late developer physically. He wasn't great. He wasn't really athletic, but an outstanding footballer with an outstanding brain at such a young age. He would see things that coaches would step back and wouldn't see. It was just, and he had that from such a young age. And I don't mean to embarrass him, but I played with Tony when we played, and he was very, very similar in that sense of. But athletically, you're wearing a running and
that's right.
Well, incredible footballer.
Reading the game.
Yeah.
Funny enough, yesterday I was watching something on YouTube and it was a game I played for West Brom, and the commentator actually said, because it was my first game for West Brom, he didn't even know who it was, but the kit back in the day, the kit used to be massive. They never used to get a small kit, and he actually said that Tony Grant looks like the mascot because of the size of the kit on me. And when I looked at it, I actually did. I looked like I've just won a ticket to play. But I remember years ago phoning Stuart up and asking him, who's the next one coming through? What have you got? And he said, we've got this kid, Wharton. And he's just got in the team. I hadn't seen him. And then about 4 days later, 5 days later, they're playing live against Blackpool, which is a derby game, and I've been a coach in them games, and the well contested games, the fears, the pitch is never the best. It's nearly always raining, windy, typical tough day, and then this kid's playing, and on that game alone, I'm saying your Evertons, your Liverpools, your Cities should have bought him on that game. I phoned him after the game, went, he's a throwback. He's a throwback from years ago. A player who lets the ball do the work. I mean, grew up with my dad saying, let the ball do the work.
Yeah.
You don't hear it no more. You don't hear coach.
No. I remember Colin Harvey saying that.
Let the ball do the work. Yeah. He was one of them. He lets the ball do the work. He looks forward. He uses all his foot, all different sides of his foot. And even in that game, he showed some glimpses of wow, that's different. I don't see no one like that. And you don't see them.
Yeah.
And he was one, and yet no one bought him, but Palace did.
He was brilliant. He was a player that was always, he'd know it. His awareness of where he was on the pitch, his awareness to receive the ball in certain areas, and then his ability to like scan and be aware of what's around him. But from such a young age, it was a bit, you go, wow, he was. And I think what probably helped was the fact he was Blackburn Rovers mad. Because at a young age, there was a lot of clubs who wanted to, take him, but he loved the club. He wanted to play for Blackburn, same as Scott, his brother. So, that probably helped us massively in terms of being able to keep him. But yeah, incredible footballer.
But do you know though when it's time to let a player go, and do you know when it's time that they have to take the next step, whether that's at Blackburn, whether that's at another club?
Yeah,
or,
I think because ultimately as well, and I'll use Adam as an example, but he was a player that you always had to challenge. And it's probably like a lot of the high potential players where they get to a point, whether that be at under 18, where the game was too easy for him. And he was a player that you had to continually challenge. So you may have to, at 16, push him up to 21s to expose him around better quality, higher intensity. So, but there then comes a point where you think, like, he's Premier League ready. He's at that point, and then it's up to any club, isn't it, as to what they want to do. But and the other set we say about parents, but what I would say about his parents, they were brilliant around him, and to really humble, kept his feet in the ground. Them as really supportive family, no pressure, and that helped him. I think Adam's pressure probably came because Scott had broke in.
Yeah, of course.
As the younger brother,
you
probably feel a little bit like he's got there. It's but no, he's an incredible footballer, and he's gone another level, hasn't he? He's gone in the Premier League, and
the parents' role is huge though as well, isn't it? I always remember Peter Clark, and Everton when he was coming through at Everton, and his mum and dad would be every single game, no matter where we went, because I covered all the games at the time for Everton, and like. Doesn't matter where you were, it'd be freezing somewhere, there'd be snow on the ground, and Peter's mum and dad would be there watching him play, and that is a massive thing, isn't it, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's a huge commitment for any of the parents who have got, kids in academy football because of the demands, the programme. You're there 4 or 5 times a week, travelling all over the country. So the cost and everything around it is astronomical. But I also think, and we used to have these conversations with parents in the induction nights, and what's really important, and I used to say to them, is just be the parent. It's that drive home in the car, because if you hear it, that all of a sudden they get in the car and they're like, you should have done this, you didn't do that, you should have. But that could be totally contradicting what the player's just being told in the dressing room. And so you've got to be really careful. And as parents, I used to say, just take a step back and just enjoy watching them play. Don't add the pressure to it to a point. But I know that still happens. Listen, it happened when we were young. I remember me dad. That's the way
there's
it was,
examples of it right through, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some parents live their life through the kids, don't they? And they want it all now. When let the kid develop. If he's going to get in the first team, you get it all in.
So it's about coaching the parents as well as the kids sometimes.
I think it's huge. I think it's huge. Yeah.
And it's probably the rewards, isn't it, if they can get there. Now, the rewards, not just financially, but the status, everything that goes with it. I think that the pressure's more and more on young players, and let's have it right, the actual chances are lower and lower.
Yeah.
So, and then you've got, to add to the mix, you've now got social media, you've now got... It's tough. It's tough.
I do think Stuart mentioned it before about opportunities. And I do think all these clubs, especially lower down, they have academy systems. Whether you're Cat 1 or whether you're Cat 3, you're still paying a lot of money. I still think opportunities should be there for all them kids. As long as they're showing something.
Yeah.
I actually think you can put them in the game. If you're at Stockport today, I honestly believe if you've got a kid who's 18, 17, 16, 17, 18, 19, and he's showing something, I think you can get him involved. There's no reason for wait, as you said before, some coaches going, he's not ready. Yeah. Sometimes, I was 10 stone wet through. Do you know what I mean? And then and you're fighting relegation, and Joe goes, you're playing. You're playing in a 4-4-2 system up against someone who's got a couple of stone on you.
Yeah.
But you just do it. You just get thrown in.
Yeah.
And I do think all these other clubs need to. They have an academy system. If you're going to have an academy system, utilise it.
I think that's where, going back to the director of football or sporting director, I think one of the key roles for that is to ensure, and what I see around when you look at these roles, is to ensure that they create that pathway for young players to come through from a recruitment perspective. So if a club needs a midfield player but there's a really high potential, I think it's probably more so the directors of football that go, we're not going after that player because we've got this person coming and this person coming through. And I think that's the role potentially why maybe more clubs are adopting that to ensure there's a pathway for young players. And you know, I think it was fortunate enough, certainly over the years, that was there for the young players coming through.
And that's when they're not playing politics with the manager, the directors, the owners, when they're not doing their other job.
Yeah.
Stuart, it's been absolutely fascinating. What next for you?
Listen, I've got a real passion for youth development. So at the moment, I'm doing some different bits, a little bit of consultancy with some clubs in America. We were looking at some other development opportunities with, you know, the technological platform for player development, so doing a little bit in that. And then I'm actually doing working within an agency, but more so just with the players that are in there and supporting them on their pathway. So a mixture of everything at the moment that involves youth development, which is my passion, really.
Yeah, well, it comes across, it really does. And we're going to just talk finally with the programme, Tony. And Stuart, feel free to join in, of course, from an international point. And we'll start with actually Adam Wharton, you know, and the fact that he's not in this England squad. Do you think that was a right choice?
No.
From Tuchel?
I mean, we mentioned last week, me and Alan were talking last week, regardless of who Tuchel was playing, England were going to win. You know what I mean? So, leaving Adam Wharton out, in my opinion, I was never going to be proven right that they're going to get beat in the centre mid area. It just looks a little bit stale.
Yeah.
I'm saying he needs to play. You know, who are England playing tomorrow? Latvia. Now, I'm saying England could play, in my opinion, they could play the B team and should be beating Latvia. Right? We used to have a B team, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Right. So, for me, Adam Wharton should be going to the America. He should be what Scholes should have been for us, in my opinion, in the early 90s.
Yeah.
That's how I see him. And everything else, run off him, work round him. But at the moment, he's not playing him.
I think, and there's an argument to suggest at the moment he's the best number 6 in the country.
Yeah.
At this moment, in terms of performances and how he's playing. Now, surely if you're preparing for a World Cup next summer, that he...
Consistency means a lot to players as well, doesn't it? You know, like to be dropped out for whatever the reason and then pulled back in and then dropped out again. I don't think that sits. I mean, I don't know. I was never a player, but it always come across to me from players that doesn't sit right. You know, you want to play every game.
Yeah.
You know.
But I don't understand who's playing instead ahead of him. You know, there's no point in playing Henderson. Henderson's had a great career and he's doing great, but you know, there's no point in playing. We've seen him at his best, and you know what you're getting off Henderson, but I don't see any point in playing him. You know, he's got Rice. Rice likes moving around the pitch. You know, we've seen him at Arsenal. He scored a few goals. He actually, you know, he can sit, and he's a great. I think Rice is a great player.
Yeah.
But I think Wharton is a head and shoulders above all of them. Personally, that's what I believe.
Yeah, and I think even on form at the moment.
Yeah.
So, and you're probably sitting there thinking, how does he feel? In terms of, I don't know, was he with the 21s? Did he go? I'm not sure, but what more can he do? He's probably sitting there thinking, what do I have to do?
Yeah, I don't get it.
Meanwhile, Oliver Glasner's probably delighted, isn't he? Because he's got a fifth player when he comes back.
Yeah.
But just finally then, on international, I mean, there was a bit this week that UEFA going to change the system and when the games are played and all the rest of it, because they say there seems to be a little bit of boredom now by fans watching these games. I mean, I think we're in the wrong city, really, in a sense, you know, because I think club football is king above any international football. But do you think international football is getting a bit?
I think the only time I've ever got excited about it as a fan is in the big tournaments,
World Cups, yeah.
World
Euros.
Cups, Euros. During the time I really watch it, most of the games you're playing against a nation that you should be putting 5, 6, 7 past most of the time.
Yeah.
You know, even when you're playing a big nation in a friendly, you know, it's hard to get up for a friendly, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm the same in terms of, like, I haven't watched England games.
I don't know anyone. I don't know anyone who watches them.
And I think, do you know, from the other side, when these internationals come about, the season just seems to have started, and then we're having a break.
That's right, yeah.
And I actually think it makes it worse for the general football fan, because you start getting back into the season, following your team, and then all of a sudden it's like 2 weeks break, and it's like, So I don't think that helps me.
Yeah, there'll be another few games, and then again another break in November.
Yeah.
You know,
But even going back when I was a player years ago, and you're getting your letters to go with the under 18s and 21s, never wanted to go. You never ever felt it was like back in the day anyway. You never felt like it was a big thing.
Yeah,
you just rather stay with your team. You know, your club team.
Are you pleased as an academy head of an academy when you see players going to play for international teams?
Yeah, listen, it's great. It's great recognition, isn't it? I guess for the work that you're doing within your building. If you've got players all of a sudden and they're becoming internationals, I think that's where the recognition comes
definitely.
from. And ultimately, we go back to that return on investment. It does potentially, certainly, the adds to that asset value, I guess, with the older players. So from that, I guess it has two-way things. But so I think from a club perspective, it's probably recognition of the work that's been done with the players coming through.
Yeah,
I'm just laughing when you said it. I was thinking of saying product, and you said asset. And I think the way we talk about footballers these days, but that's the reality of life, isn't it? In football,
you know, you got Tuchel was talking today about the lack of atmosphere, which is what you're alluding to, and it is very hard to create any sort of emotion with the connection with the team because of the way football's played now. You go back to you roll this all the way back to the EPPP. And football is almost played like academy football, isn't it? And they're playing against a team, nearly always a team, who are just defending the 18-yard box. So you're allowed to pass and pass and pass, and nothing ever happens.
Yeah. And that's the other one, just quickly on that, you talk about EPPP and assets, and you never like saying that, and that's the business side of things for return on investment. But you now got the introduction of the EPPP and the compensation rules. You've now got 9 and 10 and 11-year-olds who've got a value on them. Under the compensation, which
but that's not the same. That's not the same for Cat 3s, though, is it? As much as
no, the value of the compensation is less. If you category 1, for example, a 9-year-old's 5,000, 10,000, and it goes up. If you category 3, it's slightly less, but it still brings a value to a 9-year-old.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
And sometimes I've heard it. You know, my son's worth £30,000 at like 11. It's a bit like, well, they're only probably worth that if someone wants to buy them to a point. But that's where I'm a little bit like, it's a crazy way.
Well, Stuart, it's been an absolute fascinating insight that you've brought today. I really appreciate you coming in to the podcast, and we'll be back next week, Tony, with something a bit Everton flavoured, if you remember. We're not going to say more about that nearer the time, but thanks for listening to the Added Time podcast. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed today's conversation, and we'll speak to you soon.